over the last summer, I sort of became known as this, right, Dr. Stalin. And what about when it comes to more social issues? I notice on your Substack you have a kind of rejection of woke culture, but I'm having a hard time understanding what that means. Um, do you support, for example, say a woman's right to choose?
For abortion?
Yeah.
I think this is a poorly constructed question. Women's right to choose unconditionally does not exist anywhere in the world. Maybe Sweden is an exception. Even in liberal Europe, there's not an unconditional right to choose at any stage of the pregnancy. Broadly speaking, I'm not against abortion, but I reject this dichotomy between completely unrestricted abortion, even 8 months in, and completely banning it entirely.
Okay. So you'd favor some restrictions, is that right?
I think that's mainly women's business to sort amongst themselves. The women who are against abortion really are not being given fair representation because they are a big contingent of women who are against abortion. I personally, I would not know when to restrict it, but I just realize that it's normal for most countries to have some restrictions on when you can get an abortion.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me a little bit problematic when you start saying, well, you explain yourself, right? Like we don't typically have that, like if we take the position that abortion is healthcare, for example, you don't typically say like, why do you want a healthcare procedure, right? Like but if you're putting restrictions on it, then all of a sudden you do have to explain, right? Because they're like, okay, why do
Sure.
you want?
Can you name me communist states that have no restrictions?
Well, I mean, we're not talking about other states. We're talking about what our
Yeah,
state
I'm
should
a
be doing,
communist though,
right?
so
Yeah.
I don't agree that communist states are oppressing women by restricting abortion to some extent.
Okay. Well, that's fair. Um, what about something like gay rights? I mean, like when you go out of your way to reject woke culture, and people might think, well, maybe you just sort of hate gays. I mean, is that the case, or how would you describe your politics when it comes to LGBTQ rights and so forth?
I don't hate LGBT people, but I recognize the interest group. I'm against the interest group called the LGBT movement. Yeah, it's completely anti-communist. Has historically always served an anti-communist role. Serves the establishment. Is in bed with the NGOs, the Democratic Party, and the agenda of the ruling class. They're the ones who are establishing it as an interest group. I do think people should have rights to privacy and be left alone because of their sexuality and so on and so on. However, I don't agree that there should be a alignment between a communist movement and a so-called LGBT movement.
Given the amount of exclusion of, groups like, for example, gays and lesbians in so many different social movements, right? Political
For
movements.
example,
Well, I mean, any pretty much anything you could name, right, is exclusionary towards gays, except for like the gay rights movement itself,
I
But
disagree.
like,
There's
do you
gay
know that
people in the
gay people have
Republican Party.
been excluded from certain occupations, for example, right?
Which ones?
Really? You're unaware of that?
Today, which ones are gay people excluded from?
The question is, given the legacy of exclusion, if you're not inclusive, are you being exclusionary, right? And
I'm
then
asking you
is the
which
perception.
occupations are uh, exclusive only to straight people in America today.
Well, you're gonna have to do your own homework on that. But that is
No, there are
very
none.
clearly the case, right? I mean,
There are
like,
none.
really? Okay, all right.
No,
Um,
that's what you're implying. You can't name any, so I guess
do
there
you
are
think
none.
there were 50 years ago?
Probably.
Uh, what might be something you should look into? But given that there clearly is a legacy of exclusion, right? The
Well, how
question
does that
is
manifest itself?
the question is, does that are gays and lesbian, might they see the communist movement
Didn't you
as
say you're
exclusionary
known as
towards
Dr.
LGBTQ,
Stalin?
right? Are we cutting off a contingency here? When really, I think we should be trying to like embrace all parts of the working class, right? If you
The
cut off
Republican
certain,
Party is Christian and conservative, and they have gay people in the Republican Party.
They have a few, right?
And also,
Is
didn't you say you're
is
Dr.
that party
Stalin?
widely favored? I mean, does that matter? You know,
Hold on, didn't you
is the
say you're Dr.
Republican Party
Stalin?
widely favored by LGBTQ folks?
Sorry?
Is the party widely favored by LGBTQ
It's
folks? I
starting
don't
to.
think so.
Among gay men, it's starting to.
Maybe among the most privileged segment.
Then it's
You know,
only a matter, I mean, there's Blair White now, so it's only a matter of time. There's even transgender conservatives now. So anyway, my question to you is, you say your name was Dr. Stalin, something like this. You claim I'm a reactionary socialist when my views on this matter are more liberal than Stalin's. Stalin views homosexuality as a bourgeois degeneracy and decadence. And when a Western LGBT gay man from Britain wrote to Stalin on the persecution of homosexuals within the USSR, Stalin privately scoffed at the man and called him a degenerate. Is Stalin a fascist reactionary socialist?
You're comparing the 1920s and 30s to today. You know, things
What does
have
the
moved.
passage of time have to do with it? Time has passed, so Stalin viewed it as a fundamental perversion of bourgeois society.
I don't think that's true. But even so, what does it matter?
But they wrote as much. It was explicitly written by the Stalinist intellectuals and communist leaders of the USSR throughout the entirety of the USSR's existence, almost except maybe toward the tail end under Gorbachev. But this was always the view of communists in the USSR, which you have claimed as
Stalin and Mao and all the great revolutionaries share is that these are highly pragmatic, practical people, right? And they all share the same goal, which is global proletarian revolution, right? And I think that that's a goal we share as well, right? I mean, that would be a point of commonality between us. Am I right?
It depends on what you mean, but sure.
Oh, well, that's good, right? It depends on what I mean by global proletarian revolution. To me, let's see. This is a good question to explore, right? To me, it means, well, first you would have a global dictatorship of the proletariat, right? I mean, you have to get rid of
the bloodsucking class that
currently runs the world.
There's no.
You say no to this?
There is no framework within Marxism-Leninism for a global proletarian dictatorship. So thus far, all the examples of proletarian dictatorship have been confined to one country, and even in the interrelations between different proletarian dictatorships, such as the USSR and China, could not come to a common global framework for a proletarian dictatorship. So this sounds Trotskyist to me, that you're saying global How would you have a global one?
We'll see. This is a good question, right? But you're talking about nations jockeying over things like borders and policies and whatever, because we're coming out of a long history of the nation state where nations are these boundary, they exist in,
China and the USSR were not nation states. They still could not come to a common framework for a proletarian global dictatorship.
What we're talking about is these nations are jockeying with one another and having to protect nations.
China has several nationalities. The USSR had several nationalities within it. They were civilization states, not nation states.
I don't know how that's salient as a distinction, but the point is,
it's salient because you cannot establish an artificial unity of peoples on the basis of ideology. There are historical roots to the extent to which civilizations are united, which cannot be leapfrogged or bypassed through some kind of political framework. Now, eventually, supposedly, the idea is that borders will eventually disappear in communism and that there will be no different states as such, because the state as such will wither away. But that's not the proletarian dictatorship. The proletarian dictatorship confines itself to the existence in which the state is preserved. So how can you talk about a global state? It makes no sense.
I don't think global state would necessarily be the first step.
A proletarian dictatorship only exists insofar as the state is weaponized by the proletarian class.
What does global socialism actually look like? How does that move forward, right? Imagine that happening in not just one country or maybe a small handful of countries, but happening globally. I mean, this is a very traditional point of thought in Marxism, right? How might global socialism take root? Can it happen in one country, or are we talking about a global movement?
Sure.
Am I right?
Well, excuse me, Dr. Trotsky. The problem is that what you're talking about is a global proletarian dictatorship. The proletarian dictatorship necessarily implies a state. And the whole meaning and purport of socialism in one country is that states have civilizational and national roots. They're not based on ideologies, they're based on the specific relationship between a historically constituted people and an organ of class dictatorship. So no, you cannot have a global proletarian dictatorship. And when you talk about this global revolution happening simultaneously, it's been disproven by history that is not the path in which the victory of global communism will be established. China, Soviet Union, all of the successful
I'm glad you
communist
have so much
revolutions
faith
did
in
not
this
happen
that you
simultaneously.
would say it's disproved.
Of
That's
course,
a
it's
little bit, to
disproved.
me, that's a little bit like saying communism has been disproved because it hasn't happened yet. we don't
There is
we don't
no
actually know. You know, the jury is still
the
out on
law of social revolution necessarily dictates that it would be extremely improbable for a communist revolution to happen simultaneously across the entire globe. The
let's
basic
focus on the
law of
United
social
States then.
revolution.
Let's say we're focused on how do we achieve that proletarian revolution in the United States, and what does it look
Okay.
like? Right.
You establish a premier party of the American working class first.
Okay. What's that look like? Do you not
Doesn't
need
look like the
unity?
American left that we have now, which confines itself to an acute minority of social parasites.
Social parasites. See, when you use language like that, it really makes
Sure.
me think of things like Judeo-Bolshevism, or
Okay. Can I tell you
degenerate Marxist, or
what did the Jew Marx, who was a Jew, or do you deny that Marx was a Jew?
well, what I'm saying is when you use language like that, it really
Okay.
gives me the
Okay.
the
So
Nazi feel.
here is what Marx said. Marx, apparently, who's the next Adolf Hitler, he said, the great mass of so-called higher grade workers, such as state officials, military people, artists, doctors, priests, judges, lawyers, and you bracket those down into categories that only exist in today, like computer engineers and all that other kind of shit, hipsters or whatever, same shit, right? Some of whom are not only not productive, but in essence destructive, but who know how to appropriate to themselves a very great part of the material wealth, partly through the sale of their immaterial commodities. That's the basic structure of parasitism. Marx is describing these people as parasites. He literally calls them people partaking in the consumption, parasites on the actual producers. That's what Marx calls them. And that is the class basis of the current left. That is the only meaningful mass that the American left today has actually managed to gain a foothold in and reach out to. So for you saying this reminds you of Nazi rhetoric, are you accusing Marx of Nazism? Because he more or less said the same thing.
It is Nazi rhetoric, sure, yeah.
Okay.
But
And
when
Marx was a
Marx talks
Nazi.
about parasites, he's talking about a very particular class, and that is the
No, he's
bourgeoisie.
not. He gave a plethora of classes defined by the sale of immaterial commodities.
Well, no, these are people who live off
Sorry,
of
excuse me,
the
Dr.
social
Trotsky. These
surplus.
are his words ad verbatim. Ad verbatim. I'm quoting it to you
Well, yeah.
literally as he wrote it and as he said
Did
it.
you know that you can quote someone and still get them wrong?
Okay, explain the
You
context.
know that that's possible?
I
So
will allow you the floor to explain the context.
when Marx is very focused on surplus labor, right? And he considers a worker to be productive if their work directly produces surplus value, right? Now,
Okay.
some workers' work does not directly produce surplus value. Let's take a manager, for example, right? Marx says managers are semi-productive and semi-unproductive, right? A lot of managers are just unproductive. All they do is make sure you don't take too long of a bathroom break, right? That's not adding anything to the surplus value, and hence that worker is unproductive, right?
So why did
But there's
Marx call
lots
them
of unproductive
parasites?
workers, right? Let's say somebody works in advertising, right? They're not directly producing a product, but they're indirectly assisting with the realization of commodities, right? So, to say that they're parasites in the same sense that you would say, that the Nazis would say, oh, well, the Judeo-Bolshevik, that's a parasite.
Who
That
has
is
said
not the sense in
Judeo-Bolshevik?
which Marx is using
Who
that.
has said Judeo-Bolshevik? I
It's
said
the
an
same
acute
kind of
minority of
language.
parasites on the people.
Well, it's the same kind of language, man. Like and
I used the
particularly
same
if you
language Marx
impose,
used.
we
That's
started off
Marx's
having a
language.
point of contention because you have a post that says these people are not the same species, right?
Well,
I'm
before we
sorry,
get
but
to
that
that,
is
do you
exactly the
also
kind of
read
thing
what
the
Lenin
Nazis
said
say.
about how the intellectuals of Russia at the time thought that they were the golden class of the nation, but actually they were the shit of the nation? That's what Lenin said about the intelligentsia. He called them the
Are
shit
you
of the
saying this
nation.
in order to defend yourself? Because I don't see the connection.
I am saying you are accusing me of using Nazi language because I called people parasites. Marx said the same thing.
Well, you said that
Lenin
they were part of
basically
a
had
different species because of their dyed hair and things.
Okay, you want to talk about the Chaz degenerates?
The what?
The Chaz degenerates.
What does that refer to? I don't understand that.
The people that I am throwing it out there, questioning whether they are of our species anymore.
Okay, Chaz. Is that
That's
referred
the
to the?
Chaz mugshot. Those are the people who were at Chaz who lynched 2 black teenagers
Okay.
and were bragging about it on Twitter.
Yeah. So how
That
does it
was them.
help to question people's humanity? Um, let's say that they're activists. They're trying to do something that it might be even broadly supportive,
Lynch
right?
black teenagers activism, right?
Well, I didn't notice you making that sort of critique. Your critique seemed to be based purely on their appearance.
Do those people look human to you?
Yes, they do.
I don't think so. I think they've
Just
lost
because they
every
have colored
semblance of
hair,
humanity.
they look
I
very human to
disagree.
me.
I think they've lost every semblance of humanity.
Well, okay, let's say that you think that, right? But you see how that would be bad optics to go on a public place like Twitter and then say that, right? I mean, have you noticed
I
that
want to
many of your
initiate this.
have you
Sorry,
noticed that many of your
discourse.
communist colleagues are openly calling you a Nazi? Most
They're
communists
not
do not
communists.
have that problem. Most
No, no,
communists
no.
do
They're
not
not
get called
communists.
Nazis. They
Those
never
are
have that
American
problem.
liberals. They're not communists.
Well, like, I wonder why people don't have that problem. Maybe it's because they don't toe the line on things that look extremely racist, extremely misogynist, extremely transphobic. Why do that? I mean, where's the upside? How does it help organize workers towards a US proletarian revolution, let's say?
Mao said the first step is to draw a line. That's what I'm doing. I'm drawing a
Yeah,
line
but you're
so
drawing a
that we can
line that seems
distinguish,
to exclude a
so
lot
that
of
as
vulnerable
communists we can
people.
distinguish ourselves from these lowly scum, social scum, whose humanity is now questionable. As Marx called them, the social scum of our society, the dregs. This
I think you're
people, and
referring to the young
Engels, who
proletariat
praised the
here.
workers of France for putting up signs that we're going to shoot the thieves because they didn't want anything to do with this social scum, degenerate class of people who are the enemy of the proletariat, enemy of the working class, according to all historical communist figures.
No, I mean, that sounds like Nazi stuff right there, you know? Nazis are the one who banned stuff
Mhm.
like this, right? You
Friedrich
know?
Engels was a Nazi.
I think Hayes might be the Nazi because you're not doing a good
Who?
job defending yourself, right? Remember, we're trying to do something tactically, right? The question is,
I'm a communist with
are
a
these
capital C.
tactics
You called me a
effective?
Nazi for repeating what my communist authors have said. The people I draw inspiration from, that whose writings I'm trying to remain faithful to. You accuse me
Yes,
of
if
being a
you
Nazi
slavish
for
to
saying
keep
the same
things
thing
from
they
the
said.
past, you might end up saying the exact opposite of what they meant, you
Why?
know?
Why? Because it
Well,
became trendy. Because the corporate media made it trendy
because
to say the opposite.
because
Is that
Marx,
why?
Engels, Lenin, Stalin, these people are not trying to persecute vulnerable minorities. They're trying to create a society that works for everyone, right? Now,
To be
to do
honest,
that, you have to
to
get
be
rid of
honest,
a
I
certain
think
class of
Marx
blood
and
suckers.
Engels wanted to do more than just persecute the social scum that they mentioned. Because, yeah, I really doubt that. I think they saw the revolution as an extremely violent process. And if you saw the things that they said early on, I mean, I'm even against some of that stuff, right? But let's not get off on this idea that Marx and Engels were peace, love, hippies who said, "Oh, we love everyone." They weren't. They were fighters first and foremost for the proletarian class, and beyond the proletarian class, the broad strata of the people as a whole, meaning the democratic petty bourgeoisie of the countryside, as Lenin described it in the Civil War in France. As Marx described it in the Civil War in France, and as Lenin elaborated it with his notion of the unity of the workers and the peasants. Nowhere within this formula do we have the parasite professional managerials or the lumpen social scum.
Professional managerial class is not really a Marxist construction now, is it? Right? Because that doesn't
So
really
what
have
do you
much
call
to
the
do with.
higher grade workers who are in essence destructive and who are parasites on the actual producers and who sell immaterial commodities? Because that's how I define it. And that's Marx's
You,
language. All I've
you
done is
simply
given
call that
names.
unproductive labor. That's what Marx calls it. It's
No, but
unproductive
that's not
labor.
what Marx calls it here.
It is what Marx calls it.
Marx
He
called
says
them
there's productive
so
labor, there's
Marx called
unproductive
them
labor.
so-called higher grade workers, clearly referring to a separate strata. If you want to know how communists have historically referred to this group, like Lenin and so on, they called them the upper layers of the petty bourgeoisie or the middle class. They usually called them urban petty bourgeoisie. And that's what we're dealing with. For example, Marx talked about, in regards to the social democratic movement at the time, that the democratic petty bourgeoisie, that's what he called them, and everywhere oppressed and preach to the proletariat general unity and reconciliation, extend the hand of friendship, and seek to find a great opposition party. They seek to ensnare the workers in a party organization in which the general social democratic phases prevail, while their particular interests are kept hidden behind, and in which, for the sake of preserving the peace, the specific demands of the proletariat may not be presented. Sounds like today's DSA. Sounds like every single so-called communist left-wing organization we have in the United States today.
There are a lot of weak communist parties out there. There are a lot of
They are
weak
all
left
weak.
parties. And
Which
we
ones
need
aren't weak?
strength. We need strength, right? How does the
Okay.
working class get to strength, right? Well, you got to take the right ideological line, and the right ideological line is one that leads to unity, not fracturing, right? So, when I see somebody who has a Substack, but like all three of the articles on there are basically focused on attacking other communists, and I question, like, how does that lead to unity, right? And especially when I don't see such a strong ideology that I say, oh, yes, this is going to unite everyone, right? In fact, what I see is a pretty weak ideology to the extent that I can parse it. I see something that's pretty divisive. I think if you're peeling off big sections of the working class, if you're saying, look, we're not friends of gays, right? We're not friends of trans people. We're not
Okay.
friends of women particularly, right? We reject wokeism. We're in
What do you
favor
mean
of
friends with women?
traditional family
Ontologically,
structure.
what you're saying is nonsense. 50% of humankind is women. What do you mean against women? As if a community of men is the default? No, 50% of all human beings are women. So the fact that you're trying to establish
I'm
women as
reaching a
some
little bit
special,
because I
no.
don't actually
The
see a
fact that you're
statement
trying
from
to
you
establish, the fact
is
that
a
you're trying to
forceful
establish
rejection
women
of
as some
wokeism.
kind of separate
What does
interest
it
group
mean to
that's just like
forcefully
separate.
reject wokeism? What does that mean?
50 women, most women are not woke. They don't buy into wokeism. Stop speaking for most women. But I'll
Well,
respond to your
they don't want
claim.
to be trapped
Sure.
in a patriarchal traditional family structure. I mean, usually, there's
No,
dog
I
whistles
think
for them,
many
right?
women
Like
long.
when
I think
somebody
many women
says, I
long.
believe in conservative values, what is that a dog whistle for, right? They believe in a
Okay.
traditional family structure that enslaves women in the household. That is
I'm
what they
sure
believe in.
most women would rather be in a polycule with you. But anyway, I'll respond to what you said based on Lenin's quote. He said, "Unity is a great thing and a great slogan, but what the workers' cause needs is the unity of Marxists, not unity between Marxists and the opponents and distorters of Marxism." I consider the American left, the people that I've targeted in my Substack, the opponents and distorters of Marxism.
Okay. But in order to say somebody's distorting it, you need to have a pretty good articulation of it yourself, right? I mean, you need to
Demonstrate
attract
the
people around a
inarticulate
positive
demonstration
ideology.
of my knowledge of Marxism. Demonstrate it now. That's what we're here for.
Well, I look at what's in print. I'm a bit of a reader.
Good.
That's
Go
why
ahead.
that's my background. I'm not going to watch a bunch of debate streams. I'm not going to watch a bunch
Wonderful.
of Twitter streams.
You read my Substack. Tell
I,
us
re- I
why
did
I'm
read your
not
Substack,
articulate.
yeah, and it was pretty hard to make sense of. But I surely did not see in there. Here's what is imperialism. I did not see in there. Here's what socialism is. I did not see in here. Here's the
Lenin
countries
already
which I
did
think
that.
are on the road to socialism.
Lenin wrote imperialism the highest stage. Why should I reprint what Lenin said when he already wrote it?
Well,
I
you could
was
at least
writing
say you
about
agree with
specific
it.
things.
Instead, you say something else. You say that Trump is a more effective anti-imperialist than all of these Beizao, what's that term? A Western white leftists?
Absolutely true. I stand by that. Trump was far, far more of an anti-imperialist than all the Beiswolf frauds combined in the history of the American left since the counterculture.
Does that
All of
mean
these scum combined.
is that more of a
Trump was
dig
far
on
more
white
effective
leftists, or is that
anti-imperialist.
a support of Trump?
You can make of it whatever the fuck you want. Either that's
What do you mean by it?
condemnation and incrimination of the Bai's War, or it's somehow praising Trump. I don't really care how you interpret it. I'm not scared to be associated with Trump. My views on Trump are clear as day.
Okay, well, tell me about them. Is Trump an anti-imperialist then?
Not ideologically, but in practice, he was far more of an anti-imperialist than all the Bai's War scum combined.
Well, see, I just don't understand this because saying more or less, I mean, you're basically saying the white leftists have zero impact, right? I mean, that's kind of the point here. So, like,
yes,
you're like,
absolutely. Yes, thank
so
God
Trump
you
is,
made it so simple. Yes,
Trump is moving in a
impact.
positive direction toward anti-imperialism, in your view, then? Yeah.
Zero impact on imperialism. Zero. Actually, I take that back.
I'm talking about Trump.
Leftists exercise the role of being the cultural vanguard of American imperialism.
Well, you know, it seems like the cultural vanguard of American imperialism would actually be the U.S. mainstream media.
Okay, let me ask you a question. What do LGBT rights in Zimbabwe under Mugabe mean?
That's your question.
The LGBT movement in Zimbabwe under Mugabe, what did it mean?
Are you using Zimbabwe as a proxy for a socialist state by any chance?
I think so. Why not?
Really?
It's a socialist party. It was ruled by a socialist party. Maybe the state isn't socialist, but Mugabe is a socialist.
Interesting. You know, Zimbabwe is one of the few places in Africa that's done any land reform whatsoever. But you know, you wonder, is that land reform socialist in background? You know, because there are non-socialist land reforms, like in Afghanistan, for example. This was also done by
call it
socialists.
whatever you want. It's precisely the land reform that is the basis of any socialist movement, and what socialists would do in power is land reform.
Oh, I agree with you completely. You've got to do land reform because the basis here is a maldistribution of land that comes out of the theft of land from imperialism or settlers or what have you, right? Or enclosures in the case of Europe. So theft of the land is a primary kind of moment. And yeah, it has to be undone, right? But how should it be undone, right? Then what happens, right? What do we actually do?
So Mugabe, he should have been more conciliatory toward the landowning class of Zimbabwe at the expense of the black majority. That's what you're saying.
No, not at all.
He should have made it like a bunch of hippie communes in Zimbabwe instead.
No, I'm not a big fan of that. I'm a supporter of like the collectivization of land, you know, in the Stalinist and Maoist kind of model, you know, because you have to raise the productivity of land, right? You have an underinvestment in agriculture in a lot of these places, right? And a lot of that has to do with small plots. There's not a lot of agricultural capital and so on.
Before any of those collectivizations happened, whether that's going to take the form of Stalinist collectivization or Mao's Great Leap Forward and the establishment of the People's Communes, you had a general land reform that was not a form of collectivization.
Yeah, that's true, right? You broke the landlord class and appropriated their land. Yeah. So maybe that's phase one, right? The question is, what happens next, right?
So why bring this up? What's the point?
Well, I think we're getting a little bit afield. I think the original question was, how does, you know, going kind of out of your way to say, you know, you're not a big fan of gays, trans folks.
When did I say that? When did I say that?
Well, you say you forcefully reject wokeism. I mean, these are the groups which are out there advocating for these kinds of positions. If you reject it, I mean, it's a little confusing because I'm like, what is your actual position? That's why I'm asking questions here. But if you reject that, what are you?
So is this an interview or a debate? Is this an interview or a debate? What positions do they put forward?
Well, I can't have a debate until I know the position. You know?
Okay.
Maybe I agree with
my position is that I have nothing against gays or LGBT. I reject LGBT as a separate interest group. I reject that.
Okay. Now,
and many people who are falling under that category reject it as well. Not all gay people, for example, not all lesbians, for example, want to be, not even all transgenders, for example, want to be associated with these psychotic people who say, my pronouns are she, schwa, ji, zhu, ba, and neo pronouns make no sense. that they're not one of the two genders. There's 25 different genders. Sorry, most LGBT people probably don't agree with that.
Well, I mean, the word that's traditionally used for this in Marxism is tailism, right? I mean, you're taking the most reactionary elements of the working class and saying that's what we're
Sorry.
going to go with. That's the
Okay.
that's the common
Excellent.
denominator.
What's reactionary about what I'm saying?
Like you're moving things towards a position that is very similar to, very close to those who say these people should not have rights at all, right? I mean, that's where the country's going, right? I mean,
Okay,
if you don't take a
disagree.
side,
Who's saying that?
then
Who's saying that?
you're basically supporting the way things are going, more or less, right?
Okay,
I mean,
who's
like we're at a
saying that?
moment where the Supreme Court is banning abortion, right, and throwing out a
No, it's
whole
not.
massive law which
Supreme
supports
Court's not
all
banning anything.
kinds of progressive things, right? Like, I mean, I don't know, maybe you're not a fan of gay marriage, for example, right? Should
The
that be thrown out by the
Supreme
courts as
Court
well?
isn't banning anything.
Well,
Supreme
I
Court's
mean,
not banning anything. You're wrong
you're
about
sort of
it.
using Republican language in that. Yeah, Republicans would say, we're not banning it, we're just turning it over to the states, right? But everyone knows what's going to happen in the states, right? So I'm just wondering, like,
Whose
if you
fault is
don't
that?
care
You
about
haven't made
this
your position
say that
popular enough.
and say that it
Whose
doesn't
fault-
matter, then
Whose
that's kind
fault
of like
is it that you
supporting,
can't make
right?
your position popular? Because you want to write off the flyover states and all those people as irredeemable. So you have to use the brute force of federal legislation to enforce it on them. Because you can't win those people over. They're a lost cause. Only the coastal elites who are enlightened are redeemable in the eyes of
Sounds like a
Weiswolf and
Democrat
himself.
position to me. I'm not taking a Democrat position. I'm not talking about flyover states here. I'm talking about discursively, right? That's what we
Okay.
say is part of our
Can you tell
strategy.
me what tendency in American politics wants to say LGBT should have no rights?
Look, what we say is part of our strategy, and our strategy needs to be going towards a certain goal, right? And the goal, I think we're both on the same page here, right? The goal is workers seize power. Am I right?
Okay.
Okay. Well, so then the question is the stuff that we're saying and doing in line with that goal, or is it clashing with that goal, right?
I think
I
it's in
think
line.
if you're going against these things, then it's very hard to. You don't look like you're on the left at all, right? It looks like you're
I don't want
making pause
the
with.
left is a failure. It's unpopular. It's a failure. It failed to accomplish anything. Why would I want to look like a bunch of losers? I don't want to look like the Chaz people in that mugshot.
Oh, I think I picked that up from your tweet. You don't want to look subhuman, as you put it, right? Subhuman physique.
No, subhuman still implies a type of human. I think these people are post-human type of
Okay.
thing.
It
And they may
sounds like
lay
you're
eggs. I don't know if they lay
doubling
eggs.
down here. The question
Do they
is,
lay eggs?
if you're going to be rejecting pretty big segments of the American working class, how does that build?
What,
How does that build you?
big? Give me that as a percentage estimate. Estimate the percentage big, because I think those type of people are no more than 1%, and actually probably 0% because they don't fall under the category of working class anyway. They're lumpen degenerate scum. But how are these a big portion of the population in any capacity whatsoever? They are a loud minority on social media and on Twitter. Everywhere else, they have no voice, no representation, and no relevance whatsoever. And because I don't pander to these social parasite scum, you accuse me of being a reactionary and a tailist. I want you to justify your reasoning behind that. Go ahead, sir.
I think that when you go out of your way to attack gay people, right, then you alienate not only gays but a large segment of people who are friends with gays, right? Who have
When have
relatives
I
who are
attacked
gays,
gays? I didn't do
who
that. Stalin
support
did.
gay
I
rights.
didn't.
That's
Don't
a
blame me
big.
for what Stalin
that's a
did.
big
I didn't
part
attack gays at all.
of
Stalin
American
did that.
working class. And if
When
you
did I
if you
attack
alienate
gays?
them, you're going against your own. You're shooting yourself in the foot, basically, right?
Okay, sure.
And you could say, oh
No,
well, they're unimportant, and they're a kind of convenient whipping boy that I can use because they look unusual, you know. But again, who
are you
says
saying
stuff
I'm
like that,
attacking
right? Who
gays because I'm
says,
attacking?
excuse me,
Why
I'm
are
not
you
done talking.
insulting?
Excuse
Why
me.
are you
Who
insulting
says
gays?
just because somebody's a despised minority, then we can safely oppress them
Okay.
to score political
The
points?
people
Who
in the
says that?
Chaz mugshot. The
I'm
people
sorry,
in
who
the
says
Chaz
that?
mugshot.
Who
The
says
people in the
that?
Chaz mugshot.
Who the
Are you
fuck says
calling?
that, Hayes? Nazis
Who's?
say that shit. That's who says it.
You're getting a little
And if
angry,
you think
Dr.
that's going to make
Trotsky.
you popular,
Dr. Trotsky,
it's going to
simmer
make you
down.
popular
Simmer down.
among Nazis.
Dr. Trotsky, I don't have soda. Simmer down. Anyway, you're saying that the people in the Chaz mugshot that's what the gays are. That represents gay people.
I'm saying that when you attack activists who have put themselves on the
Oh, so
line
that's the
for a
protected
certain
class. The
cause,
protected minority is
what
the
do you look like?
ideological
What
activists of
side
the
are you
left.
on?
Hang on.
Who are you
Isn't that
allying
a little bit
yourself with?
self-serving? Isn't that a little bit self-serving where you're going to go ahead and try and say that, oh, the people who are oppressed just so happen to be the people who are discursively the ideological activist vanguards trying to push this agenda. You have turned the lumpen intelligentsia into the subject of class warfare instead of the proletariat.
And
It's so
intelligentsia is
fucking
not a term, man.
self-serving. You're basically
That's
saying
not a term.
people who think like I do and have the same ideas I have in my head are the true revolutionary class. Whereas the working class, because they don't have the same ideas, the enlightened ideas I have in my head, those are a bunch of scum and fuck them. But, oh, don't attack the protected class, the lumpen intelligentsia at Chaz who lynched 2 black teenagers. That's a sacred
These
cow. You should
enlightened
not go near
ideas that
those
you're
people.
talking about
But
are things like interracial
you can
marriage.
accuse and
You
defame
know who
the
wants to
American
abolish
working
that?
class as a basket
Republicans.
of deplorables, and you can call them reactionary scum and whatever, but I can't attack this acute minority of social parasites. Interesting.
I don't actually use terms like scum. I don't attack people's humanity.
How politically
You know,
correct
I don't
is
see
you?
that as commensurate with communist ideology in the slightest. Not
That's
even the
very politically
bourgeoisie.
correct of you.
Not even the bourgeoisie. I think the bourgeoisie should be ended, right? They should be
I
ended
think
as
you're
a
a hippie.
class. They're
I think
not
you're a hippie.
they're not less than human or whatever.
Okay,
No one is.
can I give you a quotation from Chairman Mao Zedong?
Okay, you think this is going to help your case, huh? Go ahead.
He said, "Communism is not love. Communism is the hammer we use to destroy the class enemy, smash the class enemy." That's what he said.
I love that quote. Yeah, that's a great quote. But what do you think it means?
But it doesn't.
What do you
It
think it
doesn't
means?
align well with your hippie California bullshit. Now, does it?
Oh no, it aligns perfectly with it. What do you think it means?
I think it means communism is the weapon the proletariat uses to crush and break into smithereens the class enemy. None of this language. Oh, I won't call them scum. I will call them scum. The people who rule us are parasite scum. The left is made up of parasite lumpen scum, and they are enemies of the working class.
I think it's just very dangerous and poor for a communist to say this group of leftists is scum in the same way that the bourgeoisie is. I think the bourgeoisie.
They're worse. The bourgeoisie is motivated by egotism.
You know what I'm saying?
They're worse than the bourgeoisie.
They're the ones who are actually the bloodsuckers of the poor. You don't think that the people with purple hair or whatever are the ones who are, sucking up the surplus value, do you? Is that what you think is happening here?
They are the ideological.
They're the ones who are committing imperialism on a global scale.
They are the super. Hold on. I cannot. You seem to be confused about materialism. As Marxists, we cannot ascribe moral agency to material relations of production. All we can do is condemn and attack their superstructural representatives. As far as the elimination of the bourgeoisie as a material class, and I'm not talking about the current superstructural manifestation of the monopoly bourgeoisie that's tied to the state, but the material element of the bourgeoisie that is always and everywhere reproducing itself in the countryside, as Lenin called them, that is a process that takes decades and decades and decades. It cannot directly be done in an activistic, voluntaristic way. But meanwhile, their superstructural representatives, their prostitutes, we can attack those people. We can attack the prostitutes of the bourgeoisie. We can attack the monopoly parasite manifestation of the bourgeoisie in the form of the deep state and the Wall Street and City of London financial ruling class and ruling class in general. We can attack those people. But as far as the fundamental social relation of the extraction of surplus value, as you're talking about it, that cannot be activistically destroyed in a voluntaristic way. That takes decades and decades of the development of the forces of production, which is a change in the mode of production, not a change in political relations of the superstructure.
Yeah, I don't see how you think that's helping your case, man. You're going onto somebody else's ground and you're fighting there in a place that you're weak, right? I mean, the same is true of like the use of the American flag. Like, you think that communists waving the American flag, do you think you're going to be better at waving the American flag than, before any sports game, right? Like anywhere in the United States?
Goddamn right.
Better than the military?
Goddamn right, I do.
You think you're going to be better at waving the flag than the reactionaries? They wave the flag
of my country. I was born in this country. That's the flag of my country. I was born in that country. It's my country.
But you
I'm an
have no
American.
comparative advantage there, right? Do you think you're going to be better at anti-wokeism than the reactionaries who that's all they do, right? And you know how they come off, right? They come off
Yeah,
as
but they don't
very
they don't they don't
anti-black,
call- they don't
as
they
very
don't rep
anti-gay. They
they
come out
don't rep
as
my
extremely
communist system.
misogynistic.
Hold on.
Is that who
They
you
don't
want your
hold on.
to ally
Those
yourself with?
reactionaries,
Is that who you
aren't
want
the
as your
ones who
allies?
took over. They
Do you
haven't
think they
taken over.
represent the working class? Do you think these
They're not
Republican
accountable to me. They are
anti-wokeists?
not accountable to me because they are not distorting the meaning of Marxism and communism. They're just ignorant about it. They're
Oh,
not the
yes,
ones
they
going
are.
around.
No, these are people
They're
who
not
say
the
that
ones
Stalin
going
killed 100
around
million
and
people.
making an
They are
embarrassment.
absolutely the biggest distorters of Marxism
No,
and
they're not.
communism
No, they're
that
not.
exist.
No, they're not.
Way bigger than anyone with purple hair or whatever the hell.
No,
Those people are
the
distorting
distorter is
Marxism.
not
Right?
the distorter is not the PragerU video that says communists are a bunch of lazy bum degenerates. The distorter is the person who confirms what the PragerU video is saying by identifying as a communist while being a lazy bum degenerate. That's the distorter.
What makes a person a lazy bum degenerate?
Somebody who makes excuses for their own laziness and mediocrity by trying to use the ideas of communism and class struggle to explain why, despite actually being relatively privileged in life, which most communists are, they ended up being such a fucking loser who couldn't be successful because they wanted to go to fucking arts and crafts school instead of be a doctor or something.
Isn't going to school or art school or something being successful? Like, what is being successful?
No, it's not. No, it's a waste of money and it's fucking stupid.
Okay, what's being successful?
Being successful is you spending your money wisely. If you have privilege, if you have capital to spend and you fuck that up, you're going to blame the bourgeoisie because you're a fucking dumb bum who decided to go to fucking humanities and spend all this fucking money in some dumbass fucking creative school instead of doing something that's actually going to get some actually return on your investing capital.
I don't know. I think, most people are like pro arts, like most people enjoy consuming the arts, right? Like they
Yeah,
like musicians, they like artists, they like painters. And going to school for that, I don't know that people see that as such a big negative as you're making it out. I don't think people see it as a failure. I mean, let's say you want to
those
be an
things,
activist.
and who decides who gets to have a profession where they make a living off of that? The only people who can make a living off of arts are people who produce popular art in some capacity, which is like 0.1% of them. So those are the people who can make a living off of it, and you're not entitled to that. You're not entitled to be given money for see, for example, a doctor doesn't have to be a good doctor. You just have to know how to be a doctor. That's enough, right? An artist who's doing actual creative work, you actually have to be good at that shit to get a return on your fucking investment.
I mean, good in the sense that you are like recognized by the market, right? Does that mean you're good?
Yeah. If it's
Like
not going to be the market, it's going to be the internet algorithms and clicks. And if it's not going to be that, do you think in the Soviet Union they didn't have to have artists prove their worth by actually being like popular among the masses? Yeah, you had to prove your worth.
No, I think that's better, actually. I think that's far better. You do have to prove yourself to somebody, right? But who?
Like,
The
for
market?
example,
Listen,
yeah.
the
For
market is
example, like
dominated
you
by
have
wealthy
not.
capitalists. Hey, the market's dominated by wealthy capitalists, right? Is that who we're proving ourselves to? I mean, wouldn't it be far better to prove yourself to a committee made up of workers and ordinary people and artists
No, it
themselves,
would
right?
probably be better to prove that your art is actually popular among the masses and reflects the taste of the people in the masses.
There has to be some kind of connection with the masses, right? But the market is a very poor judge of that, right? I mean, you know how the art market is dominated by you.
It's a better one than whatever fucking bureaucracy you imagine should do it instead. Like some kind of like DSA committee. Oh, we're gonna accept this art. What a horrifying thing.
Yeah, but if somebody buys like one of your pieces for $1 million, then the market has spoken, right? But one rich person could do that. Does that make you a good artist?
You're talking about so-called high art. I'm talking about popular art, which is actually mostly being fucking done through the internet, not done through money laundering schemes, which is the art world.
Well, yeah, right. The art world is full of problems. All I'm saying is that the market is not a very good proxy for your connection to the masses.
What's the market? Like, for example, this is the market, right? Infrared is much more successful at spreading these ideas than you are, as reflected by the market of YouTube. You have 4K subscribers. I have 16K. So that market has spoken. What's wrong with? But I'm sure you would prefer it that like someone appoints you as the person people have to watch instead, right?
No, I think it's great. Look, you know what? If you're a communist and we share a lot of positions in common, even though I think you have a lot of fascists, I would say, look, good luck to you. Let me see you
What
be
about
really
hold on?
successful.
But I want you to
Let me
defend
see you
your
be so
point. How
successful
is it
that I cannot
fascistic?
be in a communist space without allying with you. Let's see if that works out, right? Let's that happens.
How am I a
Let's see if your
fascist?
flag
How am I a
waving
fascist?
is so popular that people can't get enough of it. Yes, yes,
Okay, how am I a
USA,
fascist?
USA,
How am I
communist
a fascist?
USA. Okay, maybe that can happen. I mean, weird things happen, like maybe that's gonna, but you know what? This is where praxis comes in, right? This is where praxis beats theory. You can read Lenin all you want, you can quote me, whoever you
How
want,
am I a fascist?
but unless you can show me, then it doesn't really add up to very much, right? And if all you do is
Yeah.
attack other communists, I don't see that as something that's going to win. But you know
Yeah,
what?
I've been here. I've been on the
Live to
internet.
grow.
I've been on the internet for 1 year, and I've already sown I've already shook things up among the so-called online left. But I want to ask you a question. How am I a fascist? Go ahead, explain.
Well, you seem to be very interested in articulating an ideology which pisses on marginalized groups. You don't
Such
support
as,
them.
such as
What do you mean, such as? What have you been listening during this entire debate?
the petty bourgeois intelligentsia, the oppressed, marginalized petty
Well,
bourgeois
you call
intelligentsia.
them scum and
They're
parasites.
scum,
I mean,
like Marx called them.
you use
Scum.
fancy language for it that's non-Marxist, I would say.
Marx called
But
them
you're
scum.
doing the same thing. You're putting down
Okay.
a
Can I
marginalized set of groups.
should I quote what Marx and Engels
That's
said about
fascism.
the? Okay, fascism. I will quote you what Engels has said about the lumpen proletariat. This scum of the decaying elements of all classes, which establishes headquarters in all the big cities, is the worst of all possible allies. If the French workers in the course of the revolution inscribed on their houses, "Death to the thieves," and even shot down many, damn, they did it not out of enthusiasm for property because they rightfully consider it necessary to hold that band at arm's length. Sounds like they're holding those Chaz zombies that laying eggs at arm's length. Thank God for them.
Lenin is
Antifa,
coming out of a context where the petty bourgeois
Antifa.
kind of like have a huge influence in the media, right? I mean, that's sort of true today as well, right? Like, who speaks for the rich, right? It's not the bourgeoisie themselves who are
Can you
pundits and
address
on
Marx?
TV and whatever, right? It is the
Address what
petty
Engels just
bourgeoisie.
said.
Are you
Engels,
with me on this?
fascist or not? Frederick Engels, fascist or not?
Are you with me when I say it is the petty bourgeoisie that is the kind of dominant force in like among pundits and so forth, right? They're not the bourgeoisie, right? They're bourgeoisie adjacent.
Engels
They
said
hope to
the
be.
sum of the decaying elements of all classes. The urban petty bourgeoisie just so happens to be an extremely decaying class element, as the class of people who found out that they're not going to make a living being interpretive dance instructors. So, yeah, that is going to be the lumpen that Engels was talking about. Now, can you please address Engels' quotation and tell me whether or not Engels is a Nazi? Go ahead, sir.
I love how you do these long context-free quotes, and then you're like, Engels agrees with me.
Establish the context.
Engels doesn't agree with you. Engels is pragmatic, right? Engels says this, okay? We'll ally ourselves with reactionaries around an issue, and once that issue's over, then we're over, right? That's what Engels says.
Citation.
This is from Principles of Communism, right? And also from the manifesto. We'll ally
Citation.
ourselves with reactionaries. But we
Citation.
will not. We're not gonna lie in bed with them forever. We'll as to the extent that they represent
Establish
workers.
that as a context for his
The
quote
minute
about
that diverges, and our paths
he called them
diverge.
scum, sir. Dr. Trotsky. He called them scum. Can you please establish how that's the context for him calling them scum?
The term scum doesn't mean what you think it means. It doesn't mean this is somebody who we can now dehumanize.
No,
right?
it means non-binary DSA communism, right? What does it actually mean?
Wrong.
Establish the context.
I don't know. And you sound like somebody who knows words but doesn't know their meaning or something.
Sure.
Like
May I offer my
their
interpretation
word
of
always
why
has
you're?
the same meaning,
Can I
regardless of its
offer my
content.
interpretation of why you're stumbling and mumbling your way into saying shit you can't back up with anything?
Well, that's not actually what's happened here. What's happened is that you cannot
Yeah.
answer any question that
No, I
I've
can
posed to
explain
you.
why you're doing it. I can explain why you're doing
What's
it.
the strategic value of cutting off large portions of the working class? How does that
They're
help
not
you
large
organize?
portions. They're not large portions at
Oh,
all.
yeah, they are. They are large
Oh no, they're
portions.
not. They're large. You see, you think that
You
because they're
cut
big on
off
Twitter, but they're
you
not big
cut off
anywhere else.
anyone who doesn't anyone who isn't with you in the anti-woke backlash, right? Maybe some people think, hey, you know what? White supremacy
I don't
does
know.
deeply
I don't know.
affect
You see the
every
because
institution
why
in the
why do
United
I have
States
to
society.
pander and
Maybe some people have
appease?
some sympathy with that.
Hold on. I don't have to pander
Maybe
and
large
appease.
groups of people have sympathy with that.
Okay,
And then,
okay.
it's one
Did Lenin
step from
unify
that
the
saying there isn't
intelligentsia,
really
or
such
did
a
he?
thing
Okay,
as racism. There isn't
okay.
really such a thing. Is
Oh
that
yeah,
what you think?
racism. Sure, racism isn't real. Nothing's real. It's all hippie California. Anyway, can you please
Well, I
answer
don't
the
know
question for
if
me?
you're doing the equivalent of shit posting right now, or if you mean that for real, because you're not big on giving your actual positions, are you?
Yeah,
I've
here's my
had to
position.
question you point blank
Here's my
to
position.
get basic things
So
out of you.
petty bourgeois ideologists and activists aren't worth a grain of shit, especially when for decades they failed to actually reach the working class. You want me to pamper them and be nice to them when they're out here repping communism, on communism? They haven't reached anybody. They've been complete fucking failures and clowns, prostitutes of the Democratic Party at best. It's the only impact they've ever had on reality is being prostitutes of the Democratic Party and being at the cultural vanguard of U.S. imperialism. But you want me to hold their hand and baby this class of degenerate parasites when the measure is the ability to reach the working class, not to reach each other and be nice to each other and make each other feel good. Why should I participate in a left of friends? It's a friend circle of the whole left. We're all discursively comrades with each other, and we like each other, and we're holding our hands with each other. But fuck the working class. We don't have to reach the working class. We failed at doing that for decades. Let's keep lying to ourselves and babying ourselves and going down this path of, well, at least we have each other. Everyone else is a reaction. I don't buy that. I stand with the people. I stand with the American working class. I don't care about
Well, I don't
people who
know. It
call
seems
themselves
like you're calling them
communists.
subhuman. It doesn't seem like you really stand with them. It sounds like you're like, well, fuck you, left. I'm going to ally myself with
Call
Republicans and
them not
reactionaries.
subhuman,
Maybe you'll organize them. That'll be
not
interesting to
subhuman.
see, won't it?
I don't
Maybe
have to
you'll organize
organize
them.
the post-human.
Historically, what
Post-human.
organizes reactionaries well is fascism. It's saying, look, I'm going to make sure you guys are taken care of. You guys, the white straight males. I'm going to make sure that you guys have health care, right? The
What does
rest
that
of
have to
them,
do with the
no.
working class?
Fuck
So
'em.
whoever reaches the working class is a fascist.
What the hell? Is that what you think?
What are you saying? How is that anything like what I'm saying? White straight males.
Well, I'm saying when you reject wokeism, right? Whatever the hell that means, right?
Do you
When
think
you
do you
reject the
think most
idea
black
that,
people do you
look,
think
there's
most
a
black people are
patriarchy,
woke?
when you reject the
Do you,
idea
do
that
you
white
think most
supremacy is
black
the
people
key
hold
part
on?
of our
Do
history,
you think
when you reject trans rights, when you reject gay
okay, sure.
rights,
I
who do you go
reject
to?
every right in the
When
world.
you
I
wave the
reject human
flag, you gonna
I
join a
reject
reaction?
human rights. I
You're gonna
reject human
organize
rights,
them?
sir.
You're gonna
I
tell them,
reject
"Hey, I'm a
human rights.
communist. Great, look,
I'm
I
against
wave a
human
flag like
rights.
you. Let's be communists
I
together."
I'm against
I'm
human
not
rights.
friends with all those
Anyway,
people with their weird looks
okay.
and whatever. They have subhuman physiques. So they're not my friends.
They're
Maybe you'll
post
be
not
embraced by the
not
country
subhuman,
club set. I
post-human.
will be very
Post-human.
interested to see whether that's true. But I have my
Post-human.
doubts. I think you're
Post-human.
going to be rejected pretty soundly by them. But if they do take you in, I think they'll
Okay.
take you in
Let's
because
measure it.
you
Okay,
seem like a
let's do a
fascist.
race.
Yeah.
Sorry, let's do a race. 1 year from now, who has reached out to more working class people, me or you? You want to do the race?
Sure. Let's take it on. It's a challenge.
Okay. How do
What's
we
on the
measure it?
line?
With the YouTube channel? How do you
What do you
measure
mean
it?
a YouTube channel?
Because
We
you
both
went
have
by the
YouTube
way,
channels.
you went on that one conservative guy, his channel. He had 400,000 views, and you made a
Yeah.
complete ass of yourself trying to sell the average person on why Stalin was good. Not once did you talk about his living memory among the Russian people today. Instead, you talked about, oh, let's go into the history and the context. Nobody bought into it. You look at the comments; they
Oh, I'm
all
so
said
sorry
you
you
were a
didn't like
fool.
my video there. Maybe you could do better. You should reach out to
Wasn't
that
your
guy. Maybe
video?
you
You
didn't
had
do
a
it.
chance to go. You had a chance to go reach normal people and explain them why Stalin is good. You completely fail. You are a
How many
failure
views
of
did that get?
the communist cause. You are a failure.
How many
I give
views
you
did
an
that
F.
get?
I take your PhD and I'm grading you. You get an F. I have your PhD now. You're my student. I give you an F minus
Gosh,
for
in
defending
order
the
to
legacy of
grade
Stalin.
me, you would have to be my teacher, but that's not
I
exactly the
am your
situation.
teacher. I'm your teacher now. I've taken your PhD because you lost this debate
Wow.
so bad. I take your PhD. It's mine now.
Man, I got it. I got it to you. You're very entertaining. Use those skills.
No, I'm serious.
Maybe reactionaries will have similar laughs as I'm having. Maybe you'll laugh your way to
Can you
communist
define a
revolution.
reactionary? Define a reactionary.
Well, I define a reactionary as somebody whose politics are pro-capitalist and whose social views are, towards the traditional family and towards a kind of toxic Christianity. In the West, that's a reactionary, right? Somebody who
Okay, so
looks to
paganism
enslave
is
women in a
progressive.
traditional family,
So can I ask you a
who is
question?
against
Can I ask you a
gays,
question?
who is against trans, who does not believe trans people should exist or do exist even, right? Somebody who is white
Marx and
supremacist.
Engels
This is
didn't
all
say a damn
reactionary
thing about.
ideology.
Hold on. I didn't ask you just for a description. I'm asking you your reasoning. Why? Why is the trans issue
And I've given
decisive
you
for
that, man.
defining a
I've given you
reactionary?
copious amounts of reasoning. And by the way, that
What is the
applies to you
reasoning for
pretty
why
well.
a trans issue is decisive?
I didn't say it was decisive, but it's part of the mix.
Why?
Because these are people who
Why?
believe in a traditional gender binary. And
Marx and Engels
trans,
did. Well, Engels, in his Origins of the Family, said under communism, true monogamy of relation between man and woman will be realized. True monogamy, he said. He said
yeah,
monogamy. So
because
your
it's
policy
based
will,
on
there's no room for your
love,
hippie policy
not on a
will in
property
communism, according
relationship.
to Frederick Engels.
Based on love, though,
No
not
room.
a property relationship. And
Sure,
we
but he
do
said
have that.
true monogamy between man and woman. Marx
Okay.
said the most authentic human relationship is the relation between man and woman. Sounds pretty traditional to me.
Okay, well, I'm glad you have your slavish interpretation of that text. I wonder if it's broadly
Tell me,
shared or if
no,
you're the
you're
only one
saying
who has it.
you're defining reactionary about so-called traditional family roles, right? How do you define so-called traditional family roles? Reactionaries of the 19th century, are they pro-capitalism? No. Actually, in the Communist Manifesto, they pointed out that reactionary socialists were some of the largest and biggest contingent of socialists that existed at the time. They weren't pro-capitalist. They wanted to turn the wheels back to feudalism. And you also called me a reactionary socialist. I would like to see you justify that. That's why I'm asking you. What is so
Yeah, no, I
reactionary
did.
about
I
anything
did.
I'm
In
saying?
fact, I've been doing that for an hour, and now our debate is coming to a close. In fact, I've
I
explained to
want
you
you, if you're
in
gonna run
great
away now,
detail
yeah,
why
yeah.
you're reactionary and why I think your reactionary
Mr. Former Professor.
ideology
I don't call you doctor anymore.
is a bad
I call
move.
you Mister.
I think
You're not
your
doctor
reactionary
anymore.
ideology
Mr.
is
Ass. You're not
tactically
Dr. Ass.
stupid.
Change your name. You're not Dr. Ass. You're Mr. Ass
You
now.
will
Now
not be
let me ask you.
successful, man. It will not
Okay,
be
Mr.
successful.
Ass.
You're not going to
Mr. Ass.
organize people around a
Okay,
reactionary
Mr. Ass. Let me ask
ideology,
you a question.
except for
Okay, let me
fascist
ask you a
people.
question. You before you run away, I
Hey,
just
thanks
want
for
to ask
coming
you.
on, man. It's been a
You're
real
running away.
trip.
Okay, okay.
No, I'm not running away. I'm just gonna I'll give you a couple of summary remarks. All right. So during this debate, I spent the entire time asked questions in order to figure out what your actual platform is. You resist that. You don't actually explain yourself very well. You give me a bunch of random quotes and then interrupt me every time I'm talking for more than 10 seconds. But nonetheless, I still define all my terms. I still answer all the questions. And you know what? If you want to show me that you are an effective communist, fucking prove it. Show me that you're popular. Show me that you're organizing the segment that you want to organize. The petty bourgeois, Republicans. Show me that you want to organize them, and show me that you're actually doing that. Good luck with it. And the rest of y'all, I hope this has been educational. I think we all learned something about what is reactionary ideology and how it differs from
Yeah,
communism.
only 200 people are
I'll
watching
be
you. I don't
back
know who you're
next
addressing.
week.
There's
Take care,
800 are
you
watching.
guys. All right.